Okay, so in this video we're going to look at how we create the craft or the spacecraft that's going to be used by the player in the top-down space shooting game. And we're not going to use a 3D model, we're going to use an animated sprite. To create the sprite, you can see here inside Photoshop we've got 3 images of the spacecraft, using the tools inside Photoshop to actually create the image. And we've created a basic animation of the engine thrusters. You can see that they're slightly different, and this will be imported inside the Unreal Game Engine, and then we can animate it inside a thing called a flipbook. If we go back to the Unreal Game Engine, we've already created the scrolling space background, which is effectively the game world that the player will play inside. So we'll just import that picture in. So go to graphics and we'll just import the picture in. And I select the sheet, I'll open it up. Now what we need to do is we need to separate these 3 images. We could have imported them in as separate images, but before we do anything we'll just do what we did with the background. So sprite actions, apply paper 2D settings to it to get rid of the background image, and then we're going to sprite actions and this time extract sprites. Now in extract sprites, what you can do is you can divide up the image into the number of sprites that you want. So we can select grid. Okay, so we're in the sprite sheet editor. So make sure sprite extraction is selected as grid. The cell width of each sprite is 64, like I said, so put 64 in, leave the cell height as 80, was fine, and just make sure that's number of cells in X and Y, okay, you've set there, okay, and then click on extract. As you can see now, it's extracted the 3 sprites. With the 3 sprites selected, if you right click, you can create a flipbook. So now those sprites are inside this flipbook. Open up the flipbook and now we can see it playing. If you wish to change the speed, you can change the frame rate, but to be honest, looking at it, it looks okay. If you wanted to slow it down, you just increase that. Okay, so we've got that finished now. So the next thing is to put that inside the blueprint of the craft. So go to contents, go to blueprints, and the player craft is here. Open this up. And sometimes you'll see this, it's because you need to open it in full blueprint editor. A little bit easier to see. You click on viewport and go to the right view. Okay, by default you've got the default scene route. Don't worry about that at the moment. We're going to start to populate this. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to add the flipbook. So just type in flipbook and that will create it, and we could name it, but I'll leave it as it is. So flipbook, go over to the right hand side and select the source flipbook, which is the spacecraft sprite sheet paper flipbook. If you can't see it in the view, just make sure it's unlit and you'll be able to see it now. You can see now there's our sprite with the animation playing. Okay. Now we can actually make that the root, so we can drag that to the top. Okay, now for parts in the game that we need a collision area around the sprite. So to do that, if you add a component, we're going to add a sphere collider. Now this is going to help us when the obstacles collide with the spacecraft, so we can detect when it's being hit. Okay, so we can actually call that craft collider. And we can leave that for now. I'm going to compile and save that. Okay. The next thing, we need to make sure that this controllable pawn is spawned in the game. And we need to go into the 2D game BP, game mode. And if you can see down the classes, it says default pawn class. Drop that down, and we're looking for the player craft BP. And then compile and save that. Then in the world settings, make sure the game mode is the 2D game mode which we created. Last thing that we need is, if we left it as it is, it would spawn the player in the center of the world, but we want to spawn the player at the bottom of the screen. So we need to add a player start location. You want to go into the right view and just position that so it's approximately in the center. Let's look in the perspective view. As you can see in the perspective view, this is where the player will be spawned. Save that. Let's see what that looks like. Click on play. As you can see, the craft now is being spawned. It's probably a little bit too low on there, so we'll just bring that up a little bit. Test that again. That's perfect. Okay, so now we've got the craft in its start position with the little bits of animation playing. Okay, so let's just stop that. So the next video we can start to add the start menu.